Alrighty, well, thanks so much for jumping on with us today. We are going to be bringing you a webinar about a topic that I must admit I am not the most knowledgeable about, which I thought is why it would be great to have an expert on to discuss how to optimize your PSA for acquisition readiness. So just before we get into the presentation today, a little bit of housekeeping. This presentation is brought to you by the Host Broker, and we are a brokerage firm and M&A advisory firm for IT service providers such as MSPs, web hosting companies, data centers, IT service firms, and we also sell IP address blocks. If you are interested in selling your business, we offer a free evaluation on our website, which is thehostbroker.com. And there's a picture of my boss, Heartland Ross, on the slide there. Some of you might be familiar with Heartland already. And today we have a really great guest. It's Monica Ozaruk. And Monica and I met at a local MSP conference here and kind of hit it off. And, Monica has a really interesting role in that she is a consultant for optimizing PSAs for MSPs, which again is really a subject I don't know a great deal about from my brokerage seat. But we were chatting, and some of the work that Monica does is relevant, especially for sellers of MSPs who are interested in preparing their business for sale. So Monica today is going to talk to us about five key valuation factors, including pipeline, inventory, work in progress, system bloat, and quote to cash. If you're interested in getting in contact with Monica, her email address is on the slide there. We will also put it in the YouTube description. So Monica, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Devin. It's been so great to meet and connect with you in Heartland in Vancouver. So that was really fun.
Yes, it was. It was very nice to meet you. So let's get right into it then. Without further ado, the first question that we want to discuss here, the first topic, I should say, as it applies to MSP valuations and preparing an MSP for sale, is pipeline health. So, Monica, do you want to just talk to us a little bit about this topic? And we have three prompts on the slide here that we could use to kick it off as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even Devin, you're quick on the draw. But what I was just going to say as part of my introduction, if you don't mind going back one slide, is part of the reason I wanted to do this and I pitched this idea to Devin is because I have a number of MSP clients who have gone through acquisitions and bought other MSPs, and they usually bring me in to clean up the PSA of those purchased MSPs. So I've gone through and I've done this. This is something that I've done with a number of different ones. And honestly, it's very frustrating. It can be extremely messy. And I wish that sellers would do this before the sale because I think it can increase their valuation. And also, then you maybe won't need someone like me quite as much to help streamline that handover process. So these are the key things that I see and the key items that I always go in and tackle, especially after a new acquisition. So on the buy side, yes, buyers can hire me to do this, but really it's about these simple things that you can do internally to increase that valuation prior to sale. You know, your business is great. You've worked really hard on it. Let's make it look as good as possible. So, yeah, Devin, absolutely. We'll jump right into the number one most important thing, which is your sales opportunities, of course.
But thanks for the additional context there. I'm a little trigger happy sometimes on these slides, but no, I appreciate it. That's very helpful. So yeah, the first point here is just, are the open opportunities in your PSA real? So what does Monica have to say about that topic?
Well, first off, Monica knows that they maybe aren't. And when we say PSA, I'm talking about whatever you're using to track it. So hopefully you are at a maturity level where you're using a PSA, which would be sort of your one source of truth for all your information. You might be using a CRM tool. You might be using an Excel spreadsheet to track your open opportunities. I don't know what you're using, but we all know that salespeople hate putting those things as a loss. They hate saying, oh, no, the deal's not going to happen. So what I see is they say, oh, it might close next quarter. It might close next quarter. There's a chance it's going to close. And they keep these open opportunities in whatever system you're using to track it. And all of a sudden, there's this huge bloat and this overinflated number that's sitting there. And so if someone were to look and say, oh, you've got, $6 million worth of open opportunities, that might not necessarily be the case. Devin, I'm sure no one's ever seen anything like that on your head.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's a good concern to be thinking about when you're selling the business. People want to understand what the growth opportunities are and if the revenue line is projecting to be going up or down there. So in terms of practical steps, what would you recommend for an MSP owner? How do they go about reviewing their pipeline health in the PSA? Should they be looking for? What questions should they be asking their team?
Absolutely. So that comes into B, the point B, which is those accurate close dates. Whenever I go in, the first thing I do is I just filter on anything with a past due close date. And that tells me how big this problem is. If we see that half your open opportunities are maybe past due, okay, now we have to start looking. And what I like to do is say, well, is anything maybe 2 years overdue? I've seen some pretty messy systems. That those probably are not going to get one anytime soon. I cannot imagine that a 2-year-old deal at this point is an accurate reflection of what you want to be selling. And I don't think that that's something that we're going to continue going after. So I say, go in, filter, look at what kind of data you're looking at, and anything that's really, really past due that isn't going to happen. These are those ghost deals, those that forecast is being inflated. I have this thing that I put in called admin close. So you don't have to put it to a lost status. You can say that it's part of a system cleanup and just say system cleanup or admin close or whatever it is that you want to do. And people seem to be able to digest that a little bit better.
Yeah, and putting my marketing hat on for a second too, you could take those opportunities and feed them into some sort of automation to try to nurture those back to be real opportunities again. But yeah, I can appreciate how cleaning all that data up would certainly help understand the forecast on a go forward basis there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the next one we want to talk about here today is inventory accuracy. Monica, what comes to mind when you think of this topic?
Well, I think a lot of MSPs are sitting there going, well, I don't carry any inventory. This doesn't apply to me, which maybe it's true, maybe it's not. One thing that's really interesting and that I'm starting to see as a trend in the market is that quietly MSPs have started carrying a little bit more product. And so that's why I wanted this to be point two, because yes, I know we all say, oh, MSPs, everything's just in time. We just order the parts that we need, we bring them in, we work on them or whatever, or we ship them straight to the client whenever they need them. Why would we worry about carrying inventory? But things have been a little bit different. There's been a different political climate, there have been different costing implications for products. And so I've started to see MSPs carry some frequently used items that they need all the time for jobs. They are not necessarily tracking that as an asset. Inventory is an asset. You bought it, it's hurting your cash flow, which is going to be hurting your overall valuation. So unless you show where that cash is going and show that you used it to buy assets, it's going to hurt you a little bit. And I want to make sure that we call it out as something that you should be tracking it correctly.
Yeah, I can imagine this probably this trend of maybe carrying a little bit more inventory. I would imagine this maybe was accelerated by all the supply chain challenges we had after COVID,
Yeah.
where if you don't have it, the essential inventory that you need on hand, it could really cause disruptions for clients. Is that something that you've seen, like in terms of time frame? Is it over the last few years or?
Devin, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we didn't even talk about this ahead of time, everyone. He just got it, but it's COVID. So, COVID was the first time that people started stockpiling inventory, or those who had excess inventory did very well and survived that turbulence a little bit better. The other thing is it limits what you are committing to sell to your clients. So, if you know what you carry all the time, if you're really comfortable with a certain suite of products, and you say, yes, we are always going to have those, that's something you can deliver as a service to your customer. Say, yes, we can get next day installation, or we can do something on a shorter turnaround time versus having to order it and bring it in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just going to the point B here of recognizing the costs and revenues efficiently. Um, no, this is especially helpful for M&A. because from a buyer's perspective, they want to understand the revenue and cost for projects in particular versus the more recurring services, and be able to break those out and show the margins for projects versus the standard MSP services really helps them come up with a valuation and ultimately probably boost the valuation too. So this is a really important one to understand before you sell your business.
Yeah, and still just on point B, one thing that I'm seeing more and more, again, another trend is that my clients, my MSP clients are using more down payment invoices for those projects. So just like you said, Devin, they are recognizing revenue for those hardware heavy projects for things that they need to buy ahead of time using a down payment first, and that collects all the revenue that they would use for the hardware purchases.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about work in progress visibility. So the question is, how clean is your labor and billing cadence? So how do you look at this one? How should our MSP audience be interpreting this question?
Yeah, this is all in regards to projects, just as you said in the last slide, and cash flow. Cash flow is king. Cash flow is the number one thing that you really want to make sure that you have in your business to thrive. And if you ever want to purchase another MSP, you want to have the cash to do it, right? So we want to make sure that we're continuing to have cash and have cash reserves. What I notice as soon as an MSP gets to a point of maturity where they're doing more projects, they tend to wait until their project is all the way closed and then they bill all the labor. So they think of it like a really big service ticket. Service tickets, you close T&M, you bill it, great, easy. However, when it comes to a project, you're probably working on that project over a period of time, maybe over a couple months, and you're incurring labor costs over that month. So there are things like progress invoicing, the down payment invoicing that we kind of chatted about. This is getting into really the financial side of it. But ultimately, what should happen is that don't wait until the end of a project to bill your customer for everything. Bill as you're incurring costs against that project, especially labor.
Yeah, I mean, from a cash flow perspective, and also just in terms of managing the risk too. I actually saw there was a Reddit thread recently about someone who did an install at a dental office and only to not be paid for all the work after all the hardware and everything had been installed.
Oh my
So, kind of a nightmare situation there. So, yeah, I think can imagine there's a few different ways to look at the benefits for this one here. Um,
absolutely.
okay, so anything else on the work in progress visibility?
I think, yeah, no early. Again, the story that you brought up is really scary, but I think too, if you have a cadence that you're billing on, I always recommend monthly. I think that you should bill everything that's in flight monthly. So if you have a project at the end of every month, bill something for it. If you worked on it, bill something.
Good advice. And I would also just shout out a webinar we did recently with Ann Hall from IT Agree. Make sure that your contracts have stipulations for all the work you're doing, and you're not doing any work outside of this of the the scope that you wouldn't be getting paid for. So I'll add that to the slide here as well. Okay, so let's talk about system bloat now. So the question at hand is, are you actively using all those boards and statuses or just dragging around digital clutter? So what are your thoughts on this one, Monica?
I mean, I'm sure that nobody has an extra board or a couple extra workflow rules or automations or an extra tool. I'm sure everyone's running a completely nimble system. But just in case you're not, what I see happen all the time is that, especially when leadership changes, so as you go through the M&A process, sometimes there's an addition before there's a subtraction. So before you go to sell, maybe look at subtracting some excess boards, streamlining what you're doing, making sure that it's really obvious what your verticals are, what you're focusing on, and what that all kind of looks like internally, because that's how you're selling yourself too. If you look good on the outside, that's great. Now we're talking about how you look on the inside and how you're using the tools and how people are actually interfacing with your PSA system. Does it take one click to do something? Does it take 100 clicks to do something, etc.? So I think that the main thing here is be realistic, have a small team to go through and do an audit of your boards, of your statuses, of the tools that you're using, and try and minimize those as much as possible.
Yeah, and I can imagine too, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, but in an acquisition context, the buyer and the seller aren't necessarily utilizing the same PSA. I mean, obviously, if they are, it's great. There's that synergy there. But by going through and the seller cleaning up their PSA, I imagine just migrating all that over to the buyer's system is going to be simpler too. It's going to make the job just easier on the whole. Is that something that you've seen in your experience?
All the time. And I think too, if you can visualize your own organization and say this would is its own distinct piece and we could easily lift this piece out and put it somewhere else, then you have options if you wanted to sell only part of your business. If you weren't selling the entirety of your MSP, but you were selling a vertical, how closely are those verticals tied to everything else? Is there a clear board? Is there a clear workflow rule? Does that all kind of work in its own part? And exactly, could the buyer then just transpose and say, we want this, this, and this, and let's move it into our system as three distinct pieces, as opposed to a game of pickup sticks?
Yeah, keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
Uh, um, All right, and so that brings us to quote to cash clarity. And is there a clearly documented process that shows who's responsible for what from sales through invoicing? So what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think we're really getting into the age of documentation and we're starting to do SOPs, and SOPs are great. There's so many amazing AI tools you can use to record your screen and it'll write an SOP for you. That's all incredible. It's not necessarily how one person does their job. The problem is always in the handoffs. So I think that the biggest problem, the biggest stall, the biggest valuation killer is the time it takes from when something goes from one department to another department. This is where quote to cash is a good idea. So if you can say the ball starts here and sales has it, and then it passes to this team, and then it passes to this team, and then it passes to this team, etc. And and when you look at something in your PSA, you can tell which department is responsible for it. You're going to have that operational maturity. You're going to be operating at a much higher level versus things getting lost in the ether or stalling on the handoff.
Makes total sense. I can appreciate that. Yeah, and again, in an M&A context too, just having the clarity about, who's doing what the roles are, and how that ultimately produces the revenue is so important.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Monica, thanks so much for joining us today. I certainly learned a lot. As I say, this is not a topic that I have a lot of expertise in, so I appreciate you answering my questions as we went. Monica, if someone wants to get a hold of you to explore optimizing their PSA, how can they get a hold of you?
Email is definitely the best. I will get back to you. And I have a lot of, I love chatting about this. I love talking about this. So we can always book a little call and I can take a look at their PSA and see if I can be of any help.
Awesome. Well, we'll put your email and your website into the description on YouTube here. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to Monica. And if you have any questions about the host broker, our email address is on the slide there too. But thanks for listening. And Monica, great having you on.
Thank you so much.